Can I get away? It's not to feel the same without you, and not to feel the same without you. It's not to feel the same no more, not to feel the same no more, not to feel the same no more, not to feel the same.
Hey, how's it going? I recently shot a music video with an up-and-coming artist called G.Gali, aka Nico, my brother, for his new song called Made to Love. Make sure to check out the full music video. I'll also link it in the description below. It'll be on the First Floor Collective YouTube channel. But for now, let's go over the planning stage of the video. So when planning the video, I ran through a bunch of ideas with Nico, just trying to break down the meaning behind the lyrics and transform it into something visual. And immediately we knew we wanted the style of the music video to be a mixture of lyric and narrative. Basically meaning that there will be some aspects of the music video where Nico is performing the song, and other aspects which are going to be narratively driven, telling a story. We also decided the overall vibe of the music video would be quite film-like, but warm and dreamy at the same time, just to kind of emphasize the heartfelt nature of the song. So with that all set, I went home and started storyboarding. I tried my best to draw as well as I could, but the quality of my drawings started quite low, and to be honest, just went lower and lower with each new frame that I drew. But that's okay, as long as I'm able to understand what's in my head and on my storyboard, then it'll all work out just fine. And even though this looks completely terrible, it did help piece together the narrative elements of the story, as well as where these sections will be placed within the music video. And to be honest, any sort of storyboarding, no matter how basic, will always help you visualize exactly what you want your final product to look like. And I'll let you go check out the music video on your own. I figured it would be better than me explaining the story, probably do a better job than what I could do. Okay, now let's get into the equipment we used for the shoot. I was shooting with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, which I was borrowing from the First Floor Collective, so huge shout out to them. This was my first time using the Blackmagic on my own, so I was a little nervous going into it, but I absolutely love using it. It's such a great camera, and I'm honestly thinking of saving up to try and buy one of my own. It was just like such a good camera to use, and the outcome of it, just everything looked incredible. And then on top of that, I rented a 3-lens kit from Rokinon. I rented the 14, 35, and 85mm lenses. The Rokinon lenses were the cheapest cinema lenses we could rent, which was the main reason we decided to go with them. But they honestly looked really good and worked extremely well for what we were going for. They also produce a very nice, crisp, and sharp image, and both the 35 and the 85mm have a maximum aperture of t1.5. A t-stop is super similar to an f-stop, slightly different, but t-stops are just used on cinema lenses. And I think having that option to go down to t1.5 would be super nice in certain scenarios, whether you want it to be a stylistic decision or if you're just shooting in low light, it's definitely super useful to have. However, for the most part, I kept it between t2.8 and 5.6, just because I wanted to make sure that Nico was quite sharp, and I also just didn't want the background to be completely blurred out, because I really did like the locations that we had decided on, and I really wanted to emphasize those instead of them being hidden by an extremely shallow depth of field. Also, I felt like the warm film-like vibe we were trying to go for would be better served with a slightly higher aperture. Also, these lenses are quite low contrast compared to other lenses, which helps add a little bit of dynamic range, but I think most importantly, helps add that film-like look, that low contrast, filmy look that we want to go for. And of course, you can always reduce the contrast in post, but if your lens is going to help you out even a tiny bit, it's always a plus. All in all, if you're interested in getting some cine lenses, the Rokinon lenses are a cheap and great alternative that I definitely recommend, although this is not sponsored, but that'd be pretty cool. Okay, so I also used my Sony a7 III for a couple shots. It was kind of like my B cam on the shoot. I just used this for the 3 car shots at the very beginning. And the reason I used the Sony a7 III instead of the Blackmagic for those is we had to mount the camera onto the car, and I was just a little nervous putting that super big Blackmagic rig onto the suction car mount that we had. Basically, I bought this suction car mount off of Amazon for around $100 US, and it worked really well with the Sony a7 III. But like I said, I was a little too nervous with the Blackmagic on it. It is a little bit scary just seeing your camera on the outside of a car as it's driving. This is the worst part, waiting for the car to come around the corner and seeing if the camera's still in the car. But it did help get some really cool shots, and I really did like the angles that we were able to get with this car mount. So I would recommend getting this car mount if you're interested in getting these kind of shots, but just be super careful when you're using it. Double check, triple check, everything is set before you actually start driving away with it. And because we were using two different cameras, the Sony and the Blackmagic, I was a little worried that the Sony shots would look a little bit out of place. But to be honest, after a little bit of color grading, they fit right in. Okay, finally let's talk about the production of the shoot. There were three main expenses that I want to talk about. First, the rental equipment, like the lenses and such. Second, the car that we rented. And third, the apartment that we rented. So let's talk about number two, the car. We decided to rent a Ford Mustang just to add some production value to the shoot and some pizzazz, which, to be honest, in hindsight, we probably didn't utilize the car as much as we could have, which is completely my fault, but I'm still super happy that we got the shots, because I feel like if we didn't have as flashy of a car, the shots would look slightly out of place. It wouldn't really fit into this kind of music video, so definitely having that flashier car helped make those car shots look a lot better. Ideally, we would have liked to go for a more classic car to, again, match the film-like vibes that we wanted to go for, but when we searched those up online, those were insanely expensive to rent, so we decided to go for the slightly cheaper alternative of the Ford Mustang. Actually, it was much cheaper, but it was still quite expensive. And definitely worth it because it helped improve those car shots so much. And finally, probably the most important thing was to find locations. And based on the storyboard that I had created, we needed 2 or 3 locations. One nice open space, one nice looking apartment, and one nice open quiet road that we could use for just getting the driving shots. So Nico and I went on a drive to try and look for these locations, and we drove roughly like half an hour, 45 minutes out of town, out of Vancouver, until we stumbled upon this field with a railroad right next to it. Unfortunately, we couldn't actually go on the field because it was someone's farm, but we could definitely use the road next to it, which was that nice quiet road that we wanted. And of course the railroad tracks too, where we ended up filming a lot of the coverage shots. So thankfully that ticked off the 2 locations, the field and the quiet open road. Then we went home and did a bit of searching online and found this really cool apartment with a bunch of plants in it, which had a really nice tropical vibe, which contrasts and kind of complements the open, barren landscape at our other location. So we booked it in for 3 hours. And all in all, the total budget of the shoot, if you're interested, totaled up to $615 US, which Nico and I split 50-50. And finally, one last thing to get in place was one actress that we needed for the narrative elements of the shoot. So I asked my friend Tessa if she'd be down to act, and thankfully she said yes. She's an absolute legend, so big shout out to Tessa for agreeing to do this. Both Nico and Tessa absolutely killed their acting roles. Maybe it's like the good directing, Nah, it definitely wasn't. They made my job super easy. Thank you guys. Okay, let's talk about actually shooting right now. So we initially shot all of the narrative elements, which pretty much all occurred inside of the apartment. In terms of how I was directing in this music video, I only had a couple of the narrative sections where I knew exactly what I wanted to get. So with those, we spent a little more time getting them down, making sure all the beats were hit and all the narrative elements were hit as well. But like I said, they did such a good job that it just made my role as director super easy. And it turned out to be pretty fun as well.
Yo, chill. I didn't mean to.
But in terms of the performance-based shots, I basically kind of just gave Nico feelings that I wanted him to embody. And pretty much all I said was, just do your thing, but add a little bit of emotion into it. I didn't want to overcomplicate it too much because Nico, being the writer of the song, definitely understands and feels the emotions a lot better than I would or anyone else would. So I figured he'd be the best person to decide how to convey those emotions through his performance. And then from there, I would just look, see what works well on camera and what doesn't, and then relay that information back to him for the next take. And when recording those performance shots, we made sure to record the entire song at every angle that we recorded from, just so we had more flexibility in editing. And finally, I just want to say, when we went to the railroad tracks the next day to shoot the outdoor scenes, it was so cold and super windy as well. I did think the wind helped make the shots look a little bit more emotional. Definitely happy we pushed through the cold and got the shots that we needed. Okay, let's dive deeper into it and talk about exactly how we got a couple of these shots. Okay, so firstly, let's start with my favorite shot from this entire shoot, that one of Nico performing on the railroad tracks. When we were shooting this, I paid close attention to the position of the sun because that was the only light that we were using. The most important thing to make sure was that the sun was behind him so that he was backlit. Most of the time, backlighting is the key to getting a cinematic image. And as you can see, a lot of other shots within this music video also utilize the same principle of backlighting. So if you imagine how this was shot, Nico was placed in the middle between the camera and the key light, which was the sun. But we also decided to place Nico so the sun was not directly behind him, but more off to the side, which still is backlit, but also gives Nico a nice little rim light on the side of his figure. This also meant that the lens was catching a bit of the direct sunlight, which was creating a lot of those nice cinematic lens flares, which not only added to the cinematic value of the shot, but also in my opinion matched the warm film-like vibe that we were trying to go for. Okay, so the second shot that I want to talk about is this shot right here of Nico acting drunk. We saved this for the end of the shoot in the apartment because he did actually get a little drunk, you know, like a little method acting. So we didn't want that, you know, the method acting to get in the way of or to impede on the other shots that we were taking. And my goal for this shot was to create a feeling of drunkenness within the audience just by matching the camera movement exactly to Nico's movement. And usually that's done with a body rig that's like all rigged up and facing towards the actor. But in this scenario, we didn't have one of those. So basically what I did was just try to hold the camera handheld and match his exact movements. It took a couple takes, but in the end, it worked out pretty well in my opinion. And with the rest of the shots, they were all just shot on either a tripod or shot handheld. In the past, I would be super inclined to use a gimbal to try and get those nice flowy movements, but we couldn't afford to add another expense onto the rental gear list, so we decided to just go without the gimbal. But all in all, looking on the bright side of things, I do feel like smooth gimbal movements wouldn't have matched the vibe we were going for as well. So all in all, happy days. Thanks for watching. That's all for today. Next week we'll go over how we edited the music video, so definitely stay tuned for that. Definitely check out the music video and all the links in the description below. And thanks for watching again, and I'll see you in the next video.